Thank you very much, guys, for joining us here. We are live here on Facebook and Zoom. We are here with Dr. Reece and Dr. Terry. We are going to talk about coronavirus and the things that's happening in our society today. We want to have this moment as a conversation. I believe we are living in this unprecedented time. It's very difficult for all of us. It is different than we ever lived before. And we are all trying to understand what's the best way to go through this time right now. Let me introduce our presenters tonight. We have here Dr. Reece. He's a PhD. He's also the Executive Vice President for Medical Affairs at the University of Maryland, the Jones Z. and Akiko Bowers Distinguished Professor and Dean of the School of Medicine. He's a member of the prestigious National Academy of Medicine. He's also an Honorary Associate Director of the Health Ministries Department for the General Conference of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Dr. Reece received his medical education from New York University, Columbia University, and Yale University. We also have here joining us Dr. Teresa Wilson. She's a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Maryland. She has worked in a variety of inpatient and outpatient settings, with her primary specialty being psychological assessment. And I am Paulo Macena. I am one of the pastors of the Ellicott City Church. So thank you guys for joining us. Let me start with Dr. Reece. Dr. Reece, how are you today?
I'm very well, thanks.
How are you going through the situations right now about the COVID-19? So, there is a lot of questions that we are asking about it. Let me start with this one. What is coronavirus and how do we get it? What is this thing that's going on right now?
Coronavirus is not a new virus. It's a family of viruses. And you may have heard many years ago about a set of problems called SARS, and another one. Subsequently, we had a MERS epidemic. It's really Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. That's what MERS stands for, and a SARS is subacute respiratory syndrome. So these are viruses that often bring about respiratory type illnesses. This coronavirus is new. That's why it's called the novel coronavirus. It has never been, to our knowledge, seen in humans before. And so that's why a lot of the way it presents, it manifests itself, is so very different and so very new. And but these coronaviruses, as I said before, is a family of viruses that have been present in humans. This particular strain is a new strain that we're now experiencing.
So if this being a new strain of that we experience, so how can we prevent it? What would be the steps that we can take to prevent it?
Well, the best way of preventing becoming infected is, if you think of it, is try to stay away from someone who is infected. Mm-hmm. Because again, it's going to be by transmission. So if you can somehow stay away from an infected person, now I'm sure we'll get into how do we know who is infected and who is not. But for the time being, you need to stay away from infected persons. Now, we can do that in a variety of ways. Either keeping some distance from individuals, staying at home, staying away, but essentially, basically, keeping yourself away, keeping your hands clean, not washing it very thoroughly. Viruses can actually live on surfaces for some time, not very long, maybe a day or two, but at least if you are just getting in contact with a surface, you go to a supermarket, you have to be careful about making sure that you're washing your hands thoroughly, or you're using the disinfectant, or you're not touching your face, because those are the areas that the virus actually can enter the bloodstream through various orifices, or mouth or nose or eyes. And very often as we touch our faces following interaction with a counter or a surface. So the key is to keep ourselves away from those potentially infected, and at the same time just be very careful in how we interact with whether it be a tabletop or a car door, or just surfaces where the virus could actually be living on for a relatively short period of time.
Okay, okay. So Dr. Terry, people are feeling very stressed and anxious about the coronavirus.
Yeah.
What are some things people can do psychologically to cope the situation right now?
So first, Pastor Macena, I actually want to normalize the emotional experience that people are currently feeling, because I think that's really important right now. People are being thrown into abrupt multiple life changes, and many of which they never even wanted to do, like teleworking, homeschooling, or they never had plans to ever do that. So it's absolutely normal for anyone to feel stressed, overwhelmed, unsettled, out of control, anxious. And we really don't have a clear roadmap for the situation and how it's going to end, which only really intensifies the anxiety and that people are feeling and those out of control feelings. But as much as these feelings are normal to be having, the prolonged stress is also not healthy, as Dr. Reece would, I'm sure, agree with, because that can affect the immune system and make it actually not work as well. So we really want the immune system to be as healthy as possible. So that's where we get into, the tips on how can I psychologically cope. So I have a few here that I hope will really be helpful for folks. So really with this quarantine type situation, or where the social isolation, maintaining social connectedness at least once per day is really important. It's vital because loneliness is actually shown to have a negative effect on one's emotional and physical health. There's many creative ways that we can do to socially connect with people right now via online means, such as Zoom. We're doing it right now. Online book clubs can go to Zoom, or life and prayer groups, such as the Ellicott City Church has, are really great ways. There's a lot of parent support groups online right now for homeschooling, things like that, FaceTiming with family and friends. Moving on to health, so focusing on your health and your hygiene, exercising at least 20 to 30 minutes a day, that's going to really help decrease stress and improve your mood. Staying hydrated, eating healthy, the act of just going outside at least once per day, breathing in the fresh air, that can really help improve your mood immediately. Making sure to stick to a schedule. I cannot emphasize that enough, because everything is so chaotic. So sticking to a schedule will really help you feel more control in your life. And it's really going to have the subsequent effect of decreasing your stress and anxiety, especially if you have multiple competing demands, such you're trying to watch your children while teleworking, while trying to homeschool. Another thing that I've heard you often say recently is in your sermons is really limiting the reading the news and social media. So my kind of opinion is to limit that to about 30 minutes or less a day, and really put boundaries on how much you talk about it with loved ones or people that you know. There's so much negativity currently. It's really important for us to be informed, but if you are constantly bombarding yourself throughout the day with this information, it's only going to fuel your stress and anxiety. So it's really important to boundary that as much as possible. Another thing that I really, really emphasize and like is the relaxation and breathing exercises. You can actually find a lot of these on YouTube and some of the apps currently. They really help you decrease your anxiety, stop the constant ruminative worrying that you're doing, relax your muscle groups. Find some small, manageable ways to help someone else. Helping other people has actually been found to really help improve mood. So be a friend, support a local restaurant by ordering takeout potentially, sew a face mask or contribute to a food pantry. We're doing that a lot at the church, so that can help you feel better. Find something you can control, like finish a project that's been sitting on the back burner. Finding something positive in the world. There's actually a lot of positive things still happening. Laugh, find some humor in things. Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's really hard. It's okay to have these emotions right now, and reminding yourself that the situation is temporary. It's going to pass. It is a season in life. Be kind to yourself and give yourself a break. Change is hard. There's going to be a lot of rapid change right now. So you're going to have to alter your expectations. Everything's not going to be perfect, and focus on what you can do and not what you can't. Some of the things I really like are doing a daily gratitude exercise to prevent your lens from becoming really negative. So listing 3 things you're thankful for every night before you go to sleep, it really helps your brain retrain to look for the positive things. Journaling helps you kind of process some of your feelings. And then last but not least, praying. So I actually have seen a lot of times where people who have a strong faith and who pray, they really find a lot of comfort and a lot of decreased anxiety that comes with that in belonging to a church family. The act of giving your problems to God, I've seen, really can have an extremely powerful psychological effect. So those are some tips that I would give.
Yes, great. Thank you very much for these tips. It's very, very important. Yeah, we are, as we are facing the situation right now, and one thing that you mentioned, I think is very important, that we don't need to feed ourselves with all the news all the time. The things are not going to change 1 minute to the next, or 5, or even 1 hour to the next. There's no need for us to be feeding. We have to be very careful and choose what we are going to put in our minds, in our brain, times like this. So Dr. Reece, we also would like to hear from you regarding, so there is a lot of misinformation about the coronavirus being shared across social media. And what are some common myths about COVID-19 that we should dispel? What are the things that is being said sometimes over and over again, and this is not true? What would be some of the misconceptional myths that you are hearing on social media today?
There are so many, and unfortunately, some of the myths can be dangerous. For example, I've heard folks would say that children cannot catch the virus, cannot contract the virus. They're not at risk. Or on the other hand, they may say older people are the only ones at risk. Or they may say anyone who gets the virus is going to die. Or your pets are the ones that are really generating the viruses. And so if you have someone lives alone and have a pet, it really makes the person feel very guilty and wonder not if they're at risk because they have a cat or a dog. Those are myths that can really be injurious and destructive. I've heard another myth where some will say using alcohol or a disinfectant on your skin will clean the viruses from your skin, or gargling with Listerine will kill the virus. So there are just a lot of myths, and unfortunately, many of these can be dangerous because just thinking that you can really put these bleaches on your skin and that will eliminate the viruses from your body is untrue, but more importantly, may be dangerous. At the same time, saying that a child is not at risk is also untrue. As you know, in this state, we had a kid a few weeks ago at 5 years old that contracted the virus, and we've known people, in fact, the majority of people who have died so far has actually been not in the 80-year-old range, but has been anywhere from 22 to 60 in that age range. So it's not, it's really a disease that has covered the spectrum. Now, it is true that people at the older end, particularly if they have underlying diseases, are at greater risk than children at the other end who may be healthy and strong and so on. But that doesn't mean that the children are not immune or not susceptible, and the older ones are. Just the fact that there's variation, and we should realize that we all are at risk. we all should take precautions, and we all should be careful.
Yeah, thank you very much for that clarification. Dr. Terry, what are some psychological warning signs that someone's not doing well psychologically and should seek professional help in times like this? Because I'm afraid sometimes we might be worse than we think. Sometimes we think that we are okay, but maybe we are not that okay. What are some of the signs that we should be aware in times like this?
Well, so right across the board, if you do have some underlying psychological issues, stress only is going to intensify those. So I would say right off the bat, you need to make sure that you're plugged into a professional provider so that you can have appropriate therapy, medication management, appropriate treatment as needed. But some of the definite warning signs are feeling too tired or severely unmotivated to do anything. You have no energy to get out of bed, take care of yourself, kind of do your daily needs to make yourself survive. Isolating and pulling away from supports, family, friends, that's a big sign. Feeling helpless or hopeless that things are never going to get better. Drinking or using drugs to cope. Intense emotionality such as angry or violent outbursts, prolonged tearfulness, severe debilitating anxiety, and then safety concerns where you're thinking about hurting yourself or someone else. And if safety concerns do come up, you've got to get some help and call 911. That is absolutely imperative. Some of the other more common signs of stress that maybe you can just go and get some help with, you might find yourself being more easily agitated, feeling overwhelmed or tapped out, having some difficulty turning off ruminative, worrisome thoughts. You're getting some physical symptoms such as headaches. People find muscle aches, your stomach's upset, kind of sleeping issues, either too much or too little, some cognitive issues. You can have decreased focus or concentration, memory problems, changes in energy levels or fatigue, and changes in appetite. So it's really important that if you're noticing these things intensify, that you get help. And I do have some resources for folks to get some help if they need to. You can always go through your primary care provider for medication management, or they can refer you as needed. For psychological help as well, you can look through the Psychological Association, the American Psychological Association, or the Maryland Psychological Association websites. They're actually going to have providers on there, therapists, who are offering a lot of telehealth options right now. You can also call your insurance and ask for them. There's also some 24/7 crisis hotlines right now that I want to definitely give you. So the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, that's 1-800-662-HELP. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline, that is 1-800-273-TALK. The Disaster Distress Helpline, that's 1-800-985-5990. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, that's 1-800-950-6264. And all of the ones but NAMI are actually 24/7, 365 days a year. And obviously 911, if there's a safety concern, you need to call. There's also some free therapy services that are happening right now for first responders and healthcare workers, which I think is phenomenal. There's psychologists that are offering their services for these folks who are on the front lines. 3 of those are Project Parachute. Another one is Trauma Specialties of Maryland, and the Mind Body Health. And they're offering free pro bono services right now for these folks. And I think it's absolutely phenomenal. And then if anyone needs specific resources in the church, they can always call me and I can help refer folks.
All right, thank you very much. So all these informations that you gave to us, we want to do this and put this in our website, Ellicott City Church, that people can log in there and all this hotline and this information we can access there. Dr. Reece, let me go back to you. And is there an effective treatment of vaccine for COVID-19 today? What is the news about the treatment for COVID-19?
Well, unfortunately, there is no definitive treatment at this point. And let me just give you a little background. Like I said, there's no vaccine just yet. But the good news is that there are vaccine trials underway right now. So in fact, my own institution, the University of Maryland Medical School, we're involved in a national vaccine trial, and we hope that by next year, or the earliest end of this year, end of this calendar year, or early next year, we should have a vaccine. But that's not going to help us now. It'll help the next outbreak. But I think even more exciting is that there is a drug that is also is now under it's called a randomized trial, where we're comparing the current drug. It's called remdesivir, remdesivir, remdesivir. That is being compared with nothing, with placebo. And we're part of that trial right now, and there are several other states, obviously Washington State, where the outbreak was rather intense, is a part of that trial as well. And it's likely that the results of this trial will be available for this outbreak, depending on the results. Now, this drug has been around. It's been shown in animal studies to be very useful for other coronaviruses. But again, as I said, this is a novel coronavirus, so it's not the same strain. So remdesivir has been used in culture, meaning in animals, with other coronavirus, and it's been very promising. So everyone is hopeful and expecting and a little excited that remdesivir, based on the current clinical trials now, might yield positive results that could be useful during this outbreak. Now, at the present time, if one contracts the virus, one has to treat it symptomatically. So for the fever, you're gonna have to take, Tylenol or aspirin, or for the cold, you take it like any other cold. So for the symptoms that you have, you'll have to treat it just with symptomatic relief. Obviously, the more severe complications, you may have to be hospitalized for that. But at the present time, there is no definitive therapy, but I'm actually hopeful that something may be available sooner than later.
Okay. So, and Dr. Reece, what would be the complications COVID-19 patients might have? So since we don't have, you just mentioned we don't have a specific treatment. So what kind of complications we might have at this moment then?
So here's a quick story, and that is the majority of people who contract the COVID virus, the COVID-19 virus, will actually do okay. 20% won't. 20% can be very severe with severe complications. And as mentioned earlier, any age range can be affected, but we find that the older and those particularly with underlying disease tend to fare worse. People start out very simple sometimes with, they may start with a fever, a cough, some tiredness, fatigue. But here's the important one. There's a shortness of breath. You remember I said to you earlier that the coronavirus family tend to have two manifestations: the MERS, the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, and the subacute respiratory syndrome, the MERS and the SARS. They're all respiratory. So people, even with this new coronavirus, will have sometimes shortness of breath. If you're getting progressive shortness of breath, that is something to be very careful, very mindful of, and you want to call your doctor. I would advise not just to show up in the emergency room, because you may infect a lot of people by just showing up. Calling your doctor ahead of time, they may meet you separately, or you enter there are some hospitals that have screening areas that are separate, and you can be screened whether or not you do have the symptoms that are highly suggestive of a coronavirus infection, taken testing, admitted, and treated. Complications usually is when the respiratory syndrome becomes so severe that you're going to require oxygen, or even with oxygen, just can't catch your breath. You have to be intubated, where a breathing tube is put down your throat, and you have to put on a respirator. So those are the most common complications. There are other complications that typically are organ failure, other organs like your kidneys, but that's really is really end organ. The most common complications are respiratory, and respiratory that require some form of assistance, ventilator assistance. And that is really why you find a lot of patients will deteriorate and sometimes die due to the just the unrelenting respiratory impact that the virus has.
Okay. So as you guys are noticing, our questions are between the physical and the mental challenges that COVID-19 is that we are all facing, and so that's why we're asking questions regarding how our physical bodies respond to that, how our mental bodies respond to that. So, Dr. Terry, how should parents talk to their children about the virus, and should they expect behavioral changes? Or now is the time that all the parents are doing homeschooling, and the challenges for doing homeschooling for those who doesn't have any experience or doing homeschooling, and now having to talk about this situation. So give us some tips on that regard.
Well, the reality is that kids are scared and they're really feeling out of sorts too. I mean, most of them are being pulled out of school. So there's a lot of ambiguity and change and stress in the family, all over. So I think first and foremost, really asking your child what they already know and correcting their misconceptions about the virus in a developmentally appropriate way is really important. There's a lot of resources on this topic right now on reputable sites, and I'm saying reputable on purpose because there's a lot of misinformation, as well as Dr. Reece and Macena have said. So SAMHSA is one of them, and the CDC. Also, I think it's important to limit how often you talk about coronavirus with other adults when your children are present, because it's only going to increase their level of fear, especially depending on how they're interpreting what you're saying. And as much as you can, I think it's important to focus on keeping life as normal as possible and continuing to reassure them. Really developing a daily routine and sticking to it is really important. This is going to help the children feel that their environment is less chaotic. And lastly, really, you need to expect that your children are going to act out. They're going to. They're stressed. They're feeling confused. They're scared as well. So expect them to compete for more attention right now. They may regress behaviorally by having more tantrums, meltdowns, being more irritable. They may be more behaviorally challenging. They may even have some nightmares because they're scared of what they heard and they're scared of losing you potentially. They may test limits. They may be less interested in school or not want to do the homeschooling, and you're trying to work on doing teleworking while you're homeschooling. So all of these things are going to be really frustrating to parents. Right now, my biggest suggestion is don't institute harsh consequences and really watch your frustration tolerance. It's okay to have expectations, but you need to respond really gently, focus on emotional connection and reassuring the children. And sometimes parents, you're really going to have to give yourself a timeout if you need it. Frustration is normal. You're going to get frustrated, but it's also, you don't want to have your frustration go to a level where you can't control it. So you really need to give yourself a timeout and tell your kids, say, hey, I need to take a timeout right now. And also spending extra time to really play with the kids. I think this is really, this is cathartic for them. It's going to help them. Play is great for everybody. So those are kind of the tips that I would give in that situation.
Another that we are facing this new routine right now is the changing of habits or creating a new habits, So how can we kind of accelerate, let's say, and assimilate the new way that you're living, because one of the stress factor that I think is having on many of us is we don't have the light at the end of this tunnel yet. We hope can be a month, but can be 2, can be 3, we don't know. And now we have a new routine. how can we, there is some steps that we should take to, to create a new routine as soon as possible that can be, okay, this is our new normal. Because when we have a normal in our life, and I think many of psychological stress is also a component here, is that we are not doing the same things that we used to do before.
Yeah.
Now we have a new normal, and we don't know how long this new normal is going to be around us. So there are some tips that you'd like to give us, that can help us to adapt for the new normal that we have in front of us right now.
Yeah, the reality is that change is right now happening so fast, and it's requiring people to really adapt suddenly to multiple competing demands, and it's really hard. And some of them, no one wanted to do these things. No one wanted to stay home and telework and homeschool. It's difficult. It's really hard. So some of the things that I would suggest are, if you're being in a situation where you're being forced to telework, make sure that you have a designated workspace and boundary your work hours. Often people telework actually many more hours because they have a lot of difficult time transitioning from being on and off work. And really having a boundaried space in the home will help your family know that, hey, this is when I'm teleworking and this is my boundary time and I need to be able to do that. But then when I'm done and out of that space, now it's time I'm off, I can do whatever I need to do for the family. I think it's also important to know that, remember that you're not the only one going through this. There's many people who are going through this, and just knowing that other people are doing it too, or having to deal with this, it's a reminder and kind of gives you some comfort knowing that. I think it's also important that we're reframing our perspective and finding positive things about change, because maybe you were looking to make a change anyways. So now you have the opportunity to make the change. Sometimes when we're forced to make a change, it actually ends up being a positive. Like now I can write the book that I always wanted to write. I think it's also important to really set achievable daily goals, and achievable being really important keyword right now. Achieving goals really is going to help you have a positive self-regard. You're going to feel accomplished. You're not going to feel as chaotic. It's really going to improve your mood and decrease that felt stress that you're feeling. And also be kind to yourself and others and relax your perfectionistic expectations. I mean, you cannot be perfectionistic at this point. You really need to relax that and be kind to yourself, be kind to others. Everyone's just trying to survive right now and manage the best that they can. And really giving yourself that space to take a break if you need to. I think that's really important. And then for family routines, just really providing some family structured. So one of the things that I recently heard that I absolutely love is that adults really need to develop, hours of teleworking, homeschooling, and childcare that's felt fair by both. So whoever the caregivers, it's really important that, partners, spouses, grandparents, whatever, who's ever in the home, it needs to be felt by fair to everybody, so that not, everyone's on the same page, and so that not everyone's feeling stressed. And children need structure too. So if you kind of structure that and put boundaries around it, people are really going to feel and prioritize things, and people are going to feel a lot less stressed and anxious, and I think have a better time with trying to adapt to this crazy situation bombarding them.
Yeah, thank you very much for those tips. It is important that, as you said, we need to give a time out for ourselves too, a time to stop as well and reassess and see, okay, how we're going to go on with this new normal now. So Dr. Reece, let me ask a question for you now. If we have the symptoms that you mentioned before also, when should we get tested? And when should we go to the hospital? Is that a process that we should take here? How to deal with the symptoms, and when should, because I might have a coffee, a headache, and I might assuming that I have it. And I know, as you are seeing the news as well, a lot of people has been tested and they are negative, so that is what would be the symptoms that we should really, okay, now I think I have something else here.
Pastor Macena, that's a very good question, a very good and a very important question, because sometimes people, there's so many concerns that are being raised by folks that sometimes people will even believe that they're sick just because there's so many others who are. So you can have a perception of illness as opposed to the real symptom themselves. That's number one. Number two, I want to use this as an opportunity and a question to encourage people to visit the CDC website, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention website, because that's where you're going to get accurate information and, more importantly, guidance, advisories, most recent advisory, and not just pick up any newspaper or any friend, but that's where I would say you're going to get the most accurate, the most current, the most reliable information, and not from many other places. That's number one. Number two, as I said, the coronavirus family can present very much like a cold when they have an infection, because the symptoms can, and I said can be similar. A cough, maybe you may have a fever, you may have fatigue, just very tired, and then you may start to have respiratory or shortness of breath, difficulty breathing. So if you have those symptoms, it is quite reasonable, mild, for you to stay home and rest like you would just if you're getting a cold.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, if you start to get progressive shortness of breath, then you realize that this is not normal. Furthermore, you're not getting better, you're getting worse. Mm-hmm. That's when I think you ought to call your doctor and be seen and be tested. Because, for example, if you had, because I said to you earlier, there are many people who may have the mild form, and the mild form can just be treated by self-quarantine. If you had a cold and you had a cough and you had fever and you're being very tired or fatigued, you normally would just rest. Same thing here. You quarantine and you rest. And I want to also use it as an opportunity to talk about household members. Let's say you have an older mother, parents, grandparents in the house, and you have those symptoms. I would strongly advise you that you have your older relatives stay away, stay in another room until either you get over your illness or you get tested and you know that in fact you do not have the virus. Mm-hmm. So the first step is really just to assess yourself. If the symptoms are like a cold and they're mild, just self-quarantine and see if they go away. On the other hand, if the symptoms are getting worse, particularly shortness of breath, that is the key. If you're getting shortness of breath, you're almost like having difficulty breathing, you need to be seen, because that's not a normal cold manifestation. That will cause you to get seen, to get evaluated, and likely tested. And depending upon the severity, you may need to be admitted. But patients like those, individuals like those, should certainly keep themselves away from other family members who likely will get infected. And the concern is really older family members, particularly those that have underlying disease. So I would just encourage us to be, the information keeps changing.
Yeah.
And the CDC is the best source of getting the most up-to-date, the most reliable information that will provide guidance. And what I've just summarized is most recent.
So thank you for that information. Dr. Reece, you mentioned, and I would like maybe if you could go a little bit, extend a little bit more regarding families. If a member of the family contracted, or you mentioned, I would just want to emphasize this a little bit, because it also can be a very difficult situation for a family of four. Like my home here, we are four of us. If one of us we contracted, so the best way to deal with it is isolate in the room and stay there, and do not get too close to the rest of members of the family. Correct?
That is true. That, in fact, we have to, in fact, what we have to do in the hospital, we have to assume that everyone who comes in is positive. Because you have to assume that because they're going to be infectious. So some, let's say a family member in a family of 4 comes down with flu-like symptoms, Well, assume that it could be COVID-19. So have them stay in one room and observe them for the next few days. If they're getting better, it may just be a cold, but they need to have them stay by themselves. An older family member, as I said, I would strongly advise that older family member, particularly an older family member who has diabetes or hypertension or heart disease, they for sure should be protected. You should protect them and not have them come in contact with that family member who is battling something. And you have to assume that it's COVID-19 until proven otherwise. So that's a simple way of getting those two groups of people separated, but getting the one who has this flu-like symptoms self-quarantine. And fortunately, the fortunate is that the incubation period is 14 days. So it's not like you're going to have to self-quarantine for a month or months. It's really for 14 days. And if you're improving, then that's great. If you have those progressive respiratory symptoms, that is not so good. You need to be further evaluated.
Correct. So, Dr. Terry, let me jump in this now. In a situation like this that Dr. Reece was describing, I think that can be a very psychological tool for the whole family. So for the one who is going to be isolated for 14 days in the room by himself or herself, and then for the rest of the family, afraid of already having the coronavirus as well, we're afraid of getting it. Walk us through a little bit. How stressful can be this, and what would you suggestions, some tips for the family go over? Because one thing that Dr. Reece mentioned, and also is important to keep in mind, it's not forever. It's not. There is a time frame there. So, but again, it is 14 days.
Yeah, and it would be incredibly stressful. And the reality is, we're going through a really tough time, and you're likely going to know somebody who gets the virus, or we may get it ourselves. The difficulty in these situations is the isolation. You're away from people, from your loved ones. So you're going to have to connect with them in ways that you can, right? So in, online means you can do that. I think, prayer is really important. Having, reaching out to the pastor during this time, not catastrophizing. I think that is a huge one. Oftentimes we as humans just go to the worst case scenario. So it's really not helpful for you or for someone else. We really need to maintain those positive thoughts and try to stop those. And continue to try to maintain a positive outlook. You're going to feel emotions, and it's okay. And, it's okay to say, I don't feel good. I'm angry. I'm sad about this situation. I'm scared, and to give yourself permission to do this. But you need to maintain control, right? So you need to focus on breathing, relaxing, deep breathing, and calm yourself down, and focus on what you can control. So, that's really important, and focus on taking care of yourself. Because if you're not okay, and if you're not taking care of yourself, and if you're so stressed that you're making yourself sick, or if you're somaticizing, like Dr. Reece said, if you're thinking, oh no, now I have all these things, and you're starting to feel them when really they're not there, you're really going to do yourself and your loved one not a favor. And you really, to help protect other people, you really need to be okay and healthy for yourself. So control what you can control. Try to keep yourself as calm as possible. Pray, reach out if you need to. There's lifelines there, use them if you feel like you're not able to do that.
Okay. So let me ask you some questions now I think those who are watching us as well, I believe JF is our technical guy here helping us with the setup and everything. I think if those who are watching on Zoom as well, they also can ask questions on the chat, and then we can ask if you guys have any questions on Facebook or on the Zoom here. We can ask the question, Dr. Reece and Dr. Terry as well. Let me ask a question, and both of you can help us with that. Tell me a little bit about when we are going, in this, a lot of people out there, they are, there is nurses, there are doctors, and they are out there working, and then they have family members in home worrying, concerned about them. And there is this compassion fatigue. They might be, there are, when you see people in some work, there is a fire, the fireman, he runs to it, and most of us run from it, and that can be very tiring for people who are in this front line and working. What would be your suggestions for them to take care of themselves a little bit, and you also, as professionals in your areas, and in this new situation, how do you cope with this issue right now? What are some tips you guys would give to us, and also some tips for those who are in the front line in working with the front line with the coronavirus issues right now? Dr. Reece, you can start, and then we can go to Dr. Terry.
I think Dr. Terry actually said it very well at the start, and that is, human beings are very, we like to be connected with others. And I think that whether you are in quarantine, self-quarantining for suspected COVID-19 or not, or whether you're on the front lines, you can get lonely. You've heard people saying lonely in a crowd. And people can feel very lonely on the front lines just because they may not have the adequate personal protective equipment, we call PPEs, or there may not be enough testing, so they're scared and they have all those so I think the idea is to just encourage folks a lot. Reach out to them. And at the hospital, we end up sending notes to people a couple times a week, just to remind them that they need to maintain their connections with their friends. Don't get so involved to the point that they're working more than they need to and have lost the connection. They need to still try to maintain connection, still try to maintain focus, but be very but think about themselves, think about what they're doing. And so the idea is, yes, it's very easy to get caught up, whether you're a surgeon or a nurse, get caught up in the activities of the day. And sometimes the activities never end. And so as a consequence, you get completely worn out because you're in overdrive for the whole 24 hours. So the encouragement is pace yourself. Take care of yourself. Make sure you're eating. Make sure you leave and get some rest. Because if you're not get some rest, then you'll not be able to function the next day. So we encourage that type of self-care. It's not a heavy duty self-care. It's just really a reminder to pause, remind folks to reach out, to engage, to have lunch with your colleagues, and not just grab a bite while you're running. So those are some simple tips to remind the physicians or the surgeons or the nurses how to maintain their own humanity, while at the same time taking care of others. You can get lost in your own efforts to serve others.
Yeah.
I cannot agree more with Dr. Reece. Number one, it's imperative to take care of yourself. You absolutely have to. And we see a lot of compassion fatigue in psychologists and in medical professionals. I mean, this is something that we see a lot. I'm sure even in, Pastor Macena, I'm sure you've had some of these experiences. But taking care of yourself, if you're not okay and you're not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of others. So really focusing on your health, exercising, getting away from the situation and clearing your mind either through, relaxation exercises, watching a show, whatever makes you feel good. Developing a self-care toolkit is really important because you can have sort of things in that toolkit that make you feel good, and have a list of those things. And you can say, you know what, I want to do this today because this is going to help me decompress and be able to not focus on everything I saw for the day and kind of get away from it so I can be refreshed and ready to go at it again tomorrow. Another thing is that, the reality is that folks on the front lines right now are seeing things and being bombarded by things that are traumatizing. I mean, it may be that they're seeing things that are really difficult, and it is going to be a situation where you've got to talk about it to stop that kind of traumatizing sort of mindset and thoughts that come in your mind, and the things that happen when someone gets traumatized. Talking to colleagues, consulting regularly, I cannot stress that enough. I can speak for psychologists, we do that frequently, and we must, because it really helps to, help, because you're seeing and you're hearing about things that are just devastating constantly. So being able to talk about it, have another colleague there who really can kind of give you a check is absolutely important and helps you really take care of yourself.
You mentioned a partner, someone that can help us and check us out, because sometimes we don't see how stressful we are, or how bad we are in the situation. It's good to have someone that can mentor us and come alongside with us. Both of you mentioned about this sleep. So how to help people that can't sleep? Because all the things that's going on in their heads, in their minds, they might get so much stressful, or they wake up 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, look at the ceiling and concerned with with everything about the future. There are some tips to help people to sleep better in situations like this?
So really some of the things that I've found, that I talk to people about, because, these ruminative thoughts that are constantly going over and, really affect people's ability to sleep. And it's normal, right? Some people are worried about losing their jobs. They're worried about financial stability. They're worried about many things that are, if they can get their kids' school done with homeschooling. So it's just this constant bombardment of stress. So really being able to, again, that self-care toolkit of what helps you unwind is really important, and doing that before you can go to sleep, and, having a safe space in your room and where you feel like you're relaxed. Some people will exercise before they go to sleep to kind of help themselves unwind and decompress. One of the things that I actually really like as well, one of the tips that we use is give yourself 30 minutes or 20 minutes a day only to think about this thing. So I am only allowed to think about the coronavirus for 20 minutes a day, and then you say, like, between 9 and 9:20, this is when I'm going to do it. Well, the funny thing with the brain is it gets bored when it's made to do something. So sometimes that's kind of a trick that you can use to sort of, trick your mind into not being so focused and hyper-focused on those things. So again, if you can't shut your mind off and the worry gets so excessive that you're really starting to impact your functioning, your ability to sleep, your ability to do your activities, your ability to stay connected with people, your ability to do what you need to do and focus on those things, it's really time that you talk to a professional so that they can work with you on, finding ways to decrease that, and so that you can get back on track.
Sure. Thank you very much. Dr. Reece, do you have anything to add for help people to sleep better in situations like this? I think Dr. Troy said a lot of good stuff there. That's very practical ideas. Is there anything you'd like to add on the conversations for helping people to sleep better?
I think Dr. Terry covered most of it, but the only part I would just emphasize what she already said, and that is exercise is something that I would encourage, because exercise, on the one hand, it gets you, well, let me say it a different way. When you're working at that kind of, with that kind of intensity, many nurses and doctors work at that intensity all the time. So this may not be new. It's just sometimes very emotionally draining in a different way. But what happens is you can be tired from that, but there's also a subliminal focus in your mind. So you're tired, but you're preoccupied in your thoughts about what the experience that you had, which is new, and people are dying, when you either think it was unnecessary, or it's unreal, it's just too unfortunate. So that's the kind of conundrum you have. Exercising is a way of distracting you. You now get tired, but you have some new hormones, endorphins are released, so you tend to have a much more restful sleep, because now you're physically tired and you're mentally tired, and you really want to sleep, as opposed just to be exhausted from working, but at the same time preoccupied mentally with what you saw. I think that I would just add or emphasize that part of what Dr. Terry said about trying to sleep. Exercise as much as you can. It'll help you not only in coping with your day job, as it were, but it'll also help you in getting a more restful sleep when you do go to sleep.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I think those are very practical and good tips for us to follow. We are going to have maybe 10 more minutes here with the conversation. And meanwhile, if those who are watching us on Zoom or Facebook have any questions, please, you can post your questions, and I will ask the questions that you have. Let's talk about something that sometimes we worry with things that we cannot control at all. You know, there are things we can control. There are things in this situation, new situation in front of us. We have control in certain aspects of our life still, of course, and there are things we cannot control at all. How can we, in the sense, to live our lives without too much concerning things that we cannot control at all? You know, because sometimes I notice that a good portion of our stress and anxiety are related with the future, things that might happen, and they might be real, but didn't happen yet, you know. So, but they are in the future, they are not in the present. Sometimes it is in the present, but even if it is in the present, I cannot control certain things. Or sometimes the stress also can be a source from the past, you know, and we start, oh, why I shouldn't do this, I should have done that, you know. But in situations like this with the coronavirus, that we are stressed and sometimes anxious about tomorrow, when certain things about tomorrow we don't have control. Not because the coronavirus, it's just because we don't have control of certain things in the future anyway. How can our brain help us to process these things and say, why am I worrying about the situation A if I don't have control about the situation A? Is there things that I can do to help us to not to be concerned about things we cannot control? So here we're talking about things that I can control. Okay, I'm going to work on these things. And then there is these things that I cannot control at all. how can we work with our minds around this kind of thing?
You know, I would answer it that way. I would answer it by saying that this is where spirituality comes in. It's sort of that I once read a book by Dr. Francis Collins. He is the head of the National Institutes of Health, so the largest research institute in the world, and he still is there right now. And Dr. Fauci, who is on TV every day, the nation's leading scientist for the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, works directly with Dr. Collins. And he's a scientist, Dr. Collins, but he's also a religious person. And he was asked a question very much like what you just asked me. And he said, you know, I believe in science to answer the fundamental questions of biology. How our blood flows, why it flows this way, how our mind thinks, why it does this way. He said, we can answer those questions that are mechanical questions about how this works, how that works, what's the mechanism, how can we form that. But then there's another set of questions kind of about the universe, how it was formed, how is it going to end? So those are questions that are beyond fundamental research, and that's when spirituality and religion comes in. And he said, I don't find an inconsistency between science and religion, because science for him was able to answer the everyday functioning of life, humanity, but religion answered for him those much higher order questions. I think that the question you just asked about how do you control your mind to really take control of the things that you have control over, and leave those that you don't have control over. And I believe it becomes a religious exercise. If you allow yourself to really read the Bible and understand it and realize that the Lord is in control. Certain things he reveals to you and certain things he has not. And if you have doubts about certain things, let's say the coronavirus epidemic, where is it going? When it's going to end? But you realize you have no way of knowing that answer right now. But you believe that through your religious beliefs, the Lord has a way of answering that, and you leave that to him. That I believe is one way of relieving your mind of those very difficult thoughts, when it's going to end, how it's going to end. And a very big question that sometimes we ask ourselves, and that is, what if? What if this happens?
Mm-hmm.
What if that happens? That's probably the most dangerous set of questions, what if? Because very often you can't answer those what ifs, but it really becomes stressors and just confuses us. So I would just conclude by saying you're truly going to have to develop a relationship with God where you can leave some of those, just leave some of those to him. And there's a quote called the Serenity Prayer. And it says, you should know the things that you can control and know the things that you can't. But the most important part of that statement is, but don't get them mixed up. The things you can control, you should know for sure. And the things that you can't control, you should know. But don't switch them. Don't get them mixed up. Don't get them confused, or you'd be in a lot of trouble. So that's how I would answer your question.
Good. Dr. Terry, any?
So I actually love Dr. Reese's answer. I think that it's spot on in many ways, because the reality is that humans hate not feeling in control, and some of us are much better at it than others. You have the continuum where there's people who are very calm and collected in stressful situations. You know, they kind of take what is and handle the stressors that come, and they just kind of work with it. And then you have folks who are very more obsessive compulsive, who really have, you know, challenges with letting go and things like that. So, you know, the challenge here is that we've got to accept what is and let go of what we can't control, as Dr. Reece is saying. And we have the luxury, with our belief system of believing in a higher power, right, of God. And so accepting the things that we can control in our daily life and giving those over to him through prayer is incredibly powerful. And I've seen that in many different, in my work, where people who do have that it really mitigates a lot of that excessive worry. Some of the other practical things that people can do. I mean, this does require, everyone kind of deals with this differently, and it's very individually based, like I was saying. And a lot of, there's sometimes when therapy is required for these things, because it's just, people cannot turn it off. And that's okay. Sometimes we need to reach out and get medical care and mental health care to kind of work through some of these issues. And the nice thing is that there are definite therapy modalities. Specifically, cognitive behavioral therapy is really good for kind of dealing with some of these issues. But one of the things that people can do is just, tell themselves to stop, when they're going through these things. You'd be surprised at when you do that, what actually will happen. And if you continue to do that, it's a challenge, but I really believe that, our church, especially in the belief system, being able to accept, those things and letting go is just very, very powerful.
Thank you very much. I think, yes, one of the things that, for some, it depends on background, how have been raised, the environment you grew up, how we saw our parents deal with the stressful situations and things like that. And it's true what both of you guys mentioned about the what if, and there is a study done by the University of Pennsylvania that they did a survey and put some, people and about the what ifs in their lives and how much stressful the what ifs was stressful they were feeling because of this thought about something could happen. And at the end of, I think it was 2 years of studies or something like that, and they find out that 94% of the things that we were worried about it never happened. So it is, and all this amount of concern about the future. I think, as we mentioned about Jesus, the Bible, our belief system, being a Christians, that the Bible says, don't worry about tomorrow, because it's a powerful thing about, in these words of Jesus, don't worry about tomorrow, but today it's already too much, and I believe that when Jesus said that in his environment, talking to the disciples and, under the Roman Empire, but in today, let's bring for us today, I mean, we know that this thing can get worse. We know that, we really don't know the future. If we take seriously and try to talk to ourselves on that regard and say, okay, don't worry about tomorrow. Let's worry about today. Wake up today. You have 24 hours in front of you. How are we going to deal with today? And one thing I want to emphasize again, so there is too much media outside, too much information. We need to be selective. We need to, not only be selective, but we need to control ourselves with the amount of information we are getting, because we can only take so much, and it is easy for us to be stressful only because we're receiving all these information, and many of them, they are not true, So Dr. Reece, a question came here in our chat, and it says, today there was a guidance from the World Health Organization for everyone to wear face masks in public. The CDC website's guidance is still only for those who are infected. What is your thoughts on face masks for people who are not infected yet?
That's also another very good question. And this is an evolving area. The CDC has recommended it for those who are known to be infected. There is an evolving body of thought that maybe everyone should. However, there's no consensus just yet. There isn't, at least in the CDC, at least in North America, there really isn't. The Chinese in Wuhan that had the outbreak believed that they're wearing masks quite intensively may have been helpful in cutting down the impact. The problem we have is the following. One is that we're not quite sure. There is a notion that it might be protective. But number two, what is sure, it has to be a certain type of mask that is fitted to the face, and not just a regular thin mask that you can wear if you're dusting the house. But it has to be a fitted mask, one called N95. Those fitted masks really is fully almost fixed onto the face with very little gap for entry. Those, if in fact the masks are to be worn, that's the type that should be worn, because that is fitted. The others just putting on really is not helpful, because it has openings right around, and essentially you could have entry with a mask on. So at this point, we're following the CDC at this point, but I do understand, and there is an evolving set of information and data that wearing masks might be the way to go, but we're not there yet. Furthermore, we just don't have enough.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We just don't have enough.
Yeah, in the church we are open every day from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. And people are not too many, but people are coming and stopping by and giving us the masks. We are partnership with the Howard County. We are a center of collecting masks and gloves and things like that. And yesterday, someone came and dropped 100 masks, N95, the one that you just mentioned, Dr. Reece.
Right.
One person say, I have this 100 masks here, N95. And other people there come, of course, not in this quantity. But it's good to know that, we are, as a church for the government, we are considered an essential. That's why the government gave us, not only because we're a church, but gave us a freedom to be open from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock p.m. That people can come and drop off, masks, gloves, and things like that. Let me have two more questions if I don't get others from there, but this is one of them. One of the questions that I have is I'm trying to understand what was or how come the toilet paper became an issue, or in this, I'm talking to you as professional in the health area, because I understand people to be worried, concerned with certain things. I went to the Costco the other day, and I was talking to this lady. She works there, and I was asking, how are you and how the things going, and she mentioned this, it's a truck of toilet paper came in 30 minutes, it was all gone. Is there something in your mind that this start? Do you guys have any idea how this starts and why people got fixed with one thing like that? Is there any psychological, physiological thing that I try to wrap my mind around this toilet paper issue?
Dr. Terry, you want to handle that?
Well, I think there's there can be a phenomenon of groupthink. I think once everybody starts going to do something, it kind of drives society, right? And so I think that people started getting scared. So people started getting toilet paper and they started seeing, oh no, they're going out of it. And so it just starts fueling this anxiety that you're talking about. And that was just one area, this is just my opinion. I haven't really read why that is, but this is just kind of my guess. And it just kind of went from there.
I think that it's just people who have decided to, is going to be staying at home. So they want to they're going to stock up. It's like a store.
Yeah.
And they have various things on the shelf at home, just in case they're going to be home longer than they had planned. So that's my understanding.
Yeah. No, yeah. I know that people are stocking things in home, but for some reason, the thing that is stocking in home, the thing that is became like, no, we let's go and get it, is toilet paper. And I was wondering, but Dr. Terry, you mentioned something about the group fake kind of things. It can be one thing, and that could be the reason for that. Because I try just trying to understand this thing about the toilet paper. I can't wrap my mind about it. Let me ask you another question. How people can grieve in time of loss, because everyone is losing.
Yeah.
We see the kids, they're supposed to graduate this year. They are no longer going to graduate. People that they were expecting a promotion in their job, and now, the economical side of it's not going to make it possible. People who are losing their jobs. I heard today that the expectation for the job in America, the expectation was around 3 million. Now it's about 7 million. How do we grieve with loss in times like this?
Yeah, that's an absolutely excellent question. Grieving is absolutely very important, and you're right. There's going to be a lot of grieving going on. There's, kids are potentially losing their ability to graduate, have a ceremony. People are losing their ability to actually go to funerals potentially. And people need closure rituals. They need to be able to have those things. I mean, there's going to be severe disappointments going on, like you're referencing. And so really identifying and knowing, look, I am going to be going through those grieving periods, those grieving emotions, those grieving stages, and being okay with it, and knowing that that's okay. And people are going to sit there and say, this is really unfair, but it's really important to again, as I had mentioned earlier, to remind yourself that you're not the only one going through this, because that's really important. I think sometimes we become very self-centric almost sometimes on some of those things. So it's really important to remind ourselves that others are going through it too, because it kind of helps us give ourselves some compassion with that. And it's really important to find other ways to celebrate. So, or to have some closure rituals with some of those things. So sometimes, with funerals, having it later, or with celebrating graduation, or a, something like that at a later time with people that you really care about, and you can do something fun. Finding some things that you can do and focusing on those, I think, are really going to be important. And really also identifying, job loss is huge, as you mentioned. We are having an unprecedented unemployment rate right now, as I saw we've been seeing in the news. And the anxiety about that and the worry is absolutely legitimate. So being able to really, as Dr. Reece said, focusing on distraction, focusing on what you can control, focusing on what things, even by day or by moment, are positive going on, are really going to kind of help you get through some of this. And, because it's really gonna, people are gonna struggle, and there's really a lot of risk for folks to feel depressed and hopeless and helpless, like nothing is going to, improve. So again, focusing on the fact that this is a season, that hopefully it's very time limited, and that it's sooner rather than, that we'll be able to get through this sooner rather than later, and focusing on, prayer, being able to give it to God, since we do have that belief system and that ability to do that, and trust. I think that those things are really important to focus on. But also, if things get to a point where you're depressed, you're feeling so hopeless and so down that you really are unable to help yourself, you've really got to reach out to emergent services that I've talked about. Those are, and there are local community resources also that, people should be reaching out to if needed for food, clothing, things like that. In Maryland, especially 211 is the number that folks can call. There's a lot of people also that are wanting to help folks right now. There's a lot of Facebook groups and things like that where people are really coming together in amazing ways and really trying to help the community for folks who are losing jobs and things like that. So I think just finding the connection and finding a connected way to get involved in some of those things really can be helpful for folks going through this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Reece, would you like to add anything on that?
No, I think that I've never been in the military myself, nor have I been to war, but I think that it is going to be like the losses that we have had in a war, whether it be any of the past wars, and so there'll be a lot of fractures in families having lost loved ones, whether it be spouses or children, uncles and aunts. So I think that it's going to be collective grieving. If you can say, the only good thing is that I think many of us will either have a friend or a friend of a friend or a loved one, friend of a loved one, some connection to someone who has had a loss. As a consequence, that type of networking, I think, will have somewhat of a supportive chain than if it were just a sporadic loss. So it's going to be, unfortunately, very, very, very terrible time, but it really will allow some level of connectedness, because people will have identified with someone who has had a loss. Any one of us may have had a loss, but there'll be somebody else whom we may know, or a friend of a friend, have similar loss. So it gives us some commonality, and that can be helpful as long as we reach out and not try to pull in, as Dr. Terry mentioned.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, guys, for all the wisdom you share with us tonight. I just want to read a Bible verse here for us, and for us to end our interview here tonight. We mentioned about Jesus before, and Jesus telling the word about tomorrow. There's another very important Bible verse for the time we're living right now. That is on Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. Come to me, all who labor and I have burden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and lowly in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So here Jesus is saying to us, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Let's do some exchange here. What Jesus is asking us, is inviting us, is that whatever you're carrying, give it to him. Our day-to-day life and all the struggles we are facing, and all the problems and concerns and issues about tomorrow, or concerns, or real concerns about the present, for those who are losing jobs, for those who are facing the coronavirus right now, or have a family member or a friend, knowing all these things and the stress that all this can be in our lives, knowing that Jesus invites us, come to me, let me help you. So the invitation of Jesus is that, let me help you. He's offering help. He's extending his hand to us. And what you heard here today from Dr. Reece and Dr. Terry, all the tips that they gave to us, and clarifications, and all these important aspects, that we can live in this situation knowing that, you know, we can go through this. But besides all that information, let's never forget that Jesus is present in our lives all the time. One thing that I always like reminding us is that being a Christian does not take away the problems, the issues that we are facing, but it does give us peace. It does give us discernment. It does give us the assurance that we are not alone in times like this. If it's one thing that we can count on in times like this, is Jesus. We don't know anything about the future. And that's why his invitation was, don't worry about tomorrow. Why? Because he already knows tomorrow, and it's okay. Tomorrow is going to be okay. That's why Jesus says, don't worry about tomorrow. And then he says, in the present, I am with you. Right now, I'm with you. Not only I am with you, but I want to do an exchange here. You take my yoke and give yours to me, and we can walk this together. And I like that expression, together. We are seeing hashtag around, we are family, we can do this together and all that. And we can. And thank God that God gives us to us humans discernment, wisdom, and capacity and ability to go over things. But also never forgetting that with Jesus, we can face anything. So we thank you, Dr. Reece and Dr. Terry, for spending your time with us and give us this information, these tools we are going to put this in the website. I asked Dr. Reece and Dr. Terry permission to have this video on our website. Your last words, give us a few seconds for us to end the meeting right now then.
So, you know, people are stressed right now, and it's a really traumatizing situation given the constant bombardment of change and uncertainty, and it can really have a lot of negative side effects. I guess in closing, I would just say, be gentle with yourself, have compassion for others, reach out to local friends and family and church supports. You're so lucky to have the church supports here, and, you know, definitely immediate emergency resources if needed.
Perfect.
My parting words would be, we always like to know what we can do. What can we do? How can we make a difference? And the answer is yes, we can make a difference. We should follow those recommendations. Stay home as much as we can. Stay away from potential infected persons. And that way is basically what they call social distancing. Follow that tip. It's simple, but it's very effective. The other thing I want to just recommend, and that is, use the time, this sort of stay away time or stay home time, in a very profitable way. Invest that time in knowing the Lord. Get closer to Him during this time and plan the future. Plan our next steps during this time. Plan how we're going to spend time with each other, our family members and friends, and with God.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity that you gave to us, that we can come together and learn together, and knowing that you're walking with us all the time. Be with our families, be with the country, be with the world in this situation, and help them to see you, that you're in control of everything. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, friends. Again, Dr. Reece and Dr. Terry, thank you very much for your time with us. And for those who are joining us here on Zoom and Facebook, thank you very much. Appreciate you guys being online and participating in this. All right. God bless you all. Have a good night.